The incident. The desolate moon of Zarian was a gray wasteland, its surface pockmarked with craters and jagged rocks. The cold, thin mist swirled under the dim light of its 3 distant suns. Commander Jacob Moore stood firm, his boots crunching against the loose gravel as he faced the Scytherian squad. He was outnumbered 10-1, but his calm expression didn't betray any fear. The Exitherians, towering aliens with gleaming, silver-scaled armor, held their plasma rifles at the ready. Their leader, General Torque, stepped forward, his reptilian eyes narrowing at Moore. "You humans think you can trespass into Exitherian space and leave without consequences." Torque's voice was a deep growl, amplified by the translator device strapped to his neck. Moore raised a hand in a gesture of peace. "This is a misunderstanding, General. My team was conducting a rescue operation. We had no intention of violating your territory." Torque's lips curled into a snarl. "Lies. Our sensor logs show your ship near our weapons facility. A rescue mission, you say? Convenient excuse." Behind Moore, his crew watched the confrontation through a live transmission to their ship, the Horizon. Lieutenant Carla Reyes leaned closer to the screen, her brow furrowed. "Why aren't they letting him explain? This is going south fast." "Commander Moore knows what he's doing," said Chief Engineer Miles Carter, though his voice carried an edge of doubt. "He's the best negotiator we've got." Moore took a step closer to Torque, his hand still raised. "Listen to me, General. We are not your enemy. Humanity seeks cooperation, not war. My ship and crew will leave immediately if you allow us. Let's avoid unnecessary bloodshed." Torque's soldiers tightened their grip on their weapons, their glowing eyes darting to their leader for orders. Torque hesitated. He wasn't a fool. He knew humans had a reputation for relentless retaliation. But the pressure from his council had been mounting. They wanted a show of strength against the growing human presence in the galaxy. "You expect me to believe that after what your kind has done? We've seen how humans expand, taking what they want and leaving destruction in their wake." Torque's voice grew colder. "No, Commander. Words will not save you today." Moore's heart sank. He knew the Scytherians had suffered at the hands of other species, and their paranoia had only grown over time. Still, he refused to give up. "Killing me won't solve anything. It will only ignite a war you can't win." The silence that followed was deafening. Moore could hear the faint hum of the Scytherian weapons, their power cores ready to fire. He glanced at Torque's face, searching for a trace of reason. For a moment, it seemed the general might relent. Then, a sharp voice broke the tension. "Enough talk." A young Scytherian soldier, his scales gleaming with fresh battle paint, raised his rifle and aimed directly at Moore. The soldier's impatience was clear. He wanted to prove himself. "Stand down." Torque barked, but it was too late. The plasma bolt tore through the air, striking Moore in the chest. His body jerked backward, and he crumpled to the ground. On the horizon, the crew erupted in chaos. "No, Jacob," Carla shouted, slamming her fist against the console. Miles turned pale, his hand shaking as he tried to reconnect the comms. Back on Xerion, Torque froze, his eyes wide with shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. Moore lay still, his face calm even in death. Blood seeped from the wound in his chest, staining the gravel beneath him. The young soldier lowered his rifle, suddenly aware of the enormity of what he had done. I thought he was reaching for a weapon," the soldier stammered, his voice trembling. Torque turned on him with a fury that made the other soldiers flinch. "Fool, do you realize what you've done?" But the general knew the damage was irreversible. Humanity would never forgive this. Moore's comm device, still active, transmitted the scene back to the horizon. His crew watched in horror as the Scytherian soldiers surrounded their fallen commander. Carla's voice cracked as she whispered, "They killed him. They really killed him." Miles clenched his fists, his anger bubbling to the surface. They'd just declared war. Back on Xerion, Torque stared down at Moore's lifeless body, a heavy weight settling on his chest. For all his posturing, the general had never wanted this outcome. "Prepare the body," he ordered his soldiers, his voice low. "Send it back to his people." One of the soldiers hesitated. "General, is that wise?" "They will take it as an insult. They will take it as proof of our mistake." Torque snapped, his tone bitter. "And they will respond. Prepare for the storm we've unleashed." As the Exitherians worked in grim silence, the faint sound of a human distress beacon activated from Moore's suit, its rhythmic pulse echoing across the barren landscape. Humanity had heard the call, and it would answer. The ripple effect. The human colonies erupted into chaos as the news of Commander Jacob Moore's death spread like wildfire. Video footage from his bodycam, showing the final seconds before the plasma bolt struck, played across every major channel and communication feed. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity collectively mourned one of its finest heroes. Moore wasn't just any diplomat. He was a symbol, known for his bravery, intelligence, and unwavering commitment to peace. He had successfully negotiated treaties that saved billions of lives. His loss wasn't just a death. It was a direct blow to humanity's ideals. In the heart of Earth's capital, the United Galactic Alliance Hall buzzed with outrage. Ambassadors from allied species tried to calm the storm, but the human representatives were unyielding. This wasn't an accident. Ambassador Elena Royce's voice cut through the noise like a blade. She stood tall, her fiery gaze locked on the Exitherian envoy. "Your soldiers executed an unarmed man, a man who came in peace." The Exitherian envoy, a wiry diplomat named Loxer, shifted uncomfortably. "This is a tragedy, yes, but a tragedy." Royce interrupted, her voice rising. "This was murder. And you dare sit there and call it a tragedy?" The other ambassadors watched nervously. They had seen humanity's wrath before, and they knew what could come next. The last time a species had pushed humans too far, their retaliation reshaped entire star systems. On the Etherian homeworld, General Torque was not faring any better. His council of warlords berated him endlessly. "This is your doing, Torque," snarled one elder, his scales dull with age. "You let that reckless soldier act without orders." "Do you realize what you've unleashed?" another demanded. "Humanity won't stop until we're ashes." Torque stood silently, his fists clenched at his sides. He had replayed the moment in his mind 1,000 times. The flash of the plasma rifle, the way Moore had crumpled to the ground, and worst of all, the human's calm expression, as if he had accepted his fate. Finally, Torque spoke, his voice low but steady. "We made a mistake. I take full responsibility." The council erupted into chaos, but Torque's focus was elsewhere. He had studied humanity for years, and he knew one thing above all. They valued their own like no other species. Moore's death would not be forgotten. It would be avenged. On the outskirts of Etherian territory, humanity's response began to take shape. Trade routes were cut off with surgical precision. Etherian colonies reported mysterious power outages and failing infrastructure. Ships went missing in deep space, their signals vanishing without a trace. It wasn't a full-scale war. Not yet. It was a message, a cold, calculated warning. On the horizon, Jacob Moore's crew gathered in the war room. Carla Reyes, now acting captain, addressed the team. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned with determination. "They think they can get away with this," she began. "They think we'll mourn quietly and move on. But they don't understand who Jacob was, what he stood for. He wouldn't want us to start a war without cause, but he wouldn't want us to back down either." Miles Carter nodded, his jaw tight. "What's the plan, Captain?" Reyes's lips curled into a grim smile. "We hit them where it hurts. Their pride, their resources, their control. We remind them that humanity doesn't start fights, but we always finish them." Meanwhile, on a remote Exitherian mining colony, panic began to set in. Human saboteurs had disabled their energy shields, leaving them vulnerable. Whispers spread among the workers about sightings of human stealth ships, dark as the void, prowling the edges of their sector. In the colony's command center, the administrator received an incoming transmission. The screen flickered to life, revealing a human officer clad in a stark black uniform. His expression was impassive, his voice measured. "You've taken what doesn't belong to you," he said. "Now we're taking it back." The screen went dark, and moments later, the colony's storage depots erupted in flames. Humanity had made its first move. Back on Earth, a memorial service was held for Jacob Moore. Thousands gathered to honor him, from soldiers to civilians, and even members of alien species he had once helped. His family stood at the front, their faces etched with grief. As the ceremony concluded, a recording of Moore's voice played over the speakers. It was an old message, one he had recorded years ago during a crisis negotiation. "We fight for peace, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. If we falter, if we let fear and anger guide us, then we lose what makes us human." The crowd fell silent, and for a moment, it seemed as though those words might soften the fury that burned in every heart. But the reality was clear. Peace had been shattered, and the path ahead would be one of fire and vengeance. The Exetherians' regret was growing. They had underestimated the ripple effect of one man's death, but they had no idea how deep that ripple would go, or how far humanity would go to make them pay. Cliffhanger. In a shadowed war room aboard a human command ship, an admiral studied the galactic map. His finger hovered over the Exetherian homeworld before pressing down with finality. "Send the message. They need to understand. This is only the beginning." Humanity's response. The Exetherian Council sat in a grand chamber carved from obsidian, the walls glimmering faintly under the soft light of crystal orbs. But no grandeur could mask the unease gripping the room. Reports of mysterious destructions across Exetherian territories piled higher each day, and the counselors whispered among themselves, their voices tinged with fear. General Torque stood at the center of the chamber, facing their accusations. "This is your failure, Torque," one counselor hissed, slamming a clawed hand onto the table. "First, the human diplomat's death, and now our colonies are falling apart. We've become prey to their vengeance." Torque's jaw tightened. He had been hearing the same words over and over for weeks. "We underestimated them," he admitted, his deep voice steady. "But their attacks are calculated, not reckless. This is not war. They are testing us." Counselor Verix, the eldest among them, leaned forward, his golden scales catching the light. "Testing us for what? To see how long we can endure their games, or to prepare for annihilation." Before Torque could respond, the chamber's communicator chimed. The screen on the far wall flickered to life, displaying a human face. Admiral Grant Sinclair of the United Earth Fleet stared back at them, his expression calm but cold. "Greetings, esteemed Exetherian leaders," Sinclair began, his tone devoid of any warmth. "I hope you've been enjoying the reminders of your mistake." The room fell silent. Even the most arrogant counselors dared not interrupt. Sinclair continued, his voice like steel. "Your actions have consequences. Commander Jacob Moore was a man of peace, and you repaid his efforts with violence. Humanity does not take such betrayals lightly." Verix found his voice, though it wavered. We did not authorize his death. It was a rogue soldier." "Save your excuses," Sinclair cut him off, his eyes narrowing. "You pulled the trigger, whether through orders or negligence, and now you're learning what happens when you cross humanity." On the fringes of Exetherian space, humanity's silent war continued. A convoy of Exetherian supply ships drifted through a quiet sector, their escorts scanning for any signs of human presence. The convoy leader, Commander Virak, sat uneasily in his command chair. He had heard the stories, how human ships could appear out of nowhere, strike without warning, and vanish before anyone could retaliate. "Stay alert," Virak barked at his crew. "Humans are like predators. They attack when you least expect it." As if summoned by his words, the convoy sensors blared. A shadow moved among the stars. No, multiple shadows. Human stealth ships uncloaked in perfect formation, their black hulls absorbing the faint starlight. Before Varek could order evasive maneuvers, a voice crackled through the comms. "This is Captain Carla Reyes of the Horizon. Your ships are now under our control. Power down and surrender, or face the consequences." Varek sneered. "You don't scare us, human. We'll fight to the death." Reyes's response was a single word: understood. The human ships struck with precision, disabling the Exitherian engines and weapons within moments. The convoy's escorts tried to retaliate, but their shots missed wildly, as if the humans had predicted their every move. It wasn't a battle, it was a dismantling. Within minutes, the Exitherian ships were adrift, their crews helpless. Reyes ordered her crew to seize the cargo, medical supplies, fuel, and rare minerals. As her ship pulled away, she left one final message: "You've just experienced a fraction of what we can do. Consider this your warning." The Exitherian Council convened again, now in full panic. Reports of raids, sabotage, and infiltrations poured in from across their empire. Entire sectors were paralyzed, and the Exitherian economy teetered on the brink of collapse. "What do they want from us?" one counselor wailed. "Why haven't they declared war outright?" Varex's voice trembled with a rare vulnerability. "Because this is war. Not the kind we expected, but one we cannot fight." Torque remained silent, his gaze fixed on a holographic image of Jacob Moore. The human's peaceful expression haunted him, a stark reminder of everything they had destroyed. He had always believed humanity's strength lay in its technology or its vast fleets. But now he realized their true power was something far greater: unity. On Earth, humanity's leadership debated their next move. Admiral Sinclair stood before a council of his own, presenting the results of their campaign. "The Exitherians are reeling," Sinclair reported. "Their trade routes are severed, their colonies destabilized, and their fleets scattered. They've lost control of their outer territories." President Leela Monroe, a sharp-eyed woman with decades of experience in interstellar politics, leaned forward. "And yet they haven't offered a formal apology or reparations. Why?" Sinclair's expression darkened. "Because they're proud. They won't admit defeat until we force them to." Monroe nodded slowly. "Then we force them, but not with violence, not yet. We need them to understand that peace isn't their weakness, it's ours." As the Exitherians scrambled to recover, a new broadcast echoed across their empire. It came from Earth's galactic broadcasting network, but the message was aimed directly at the Exitherian people. The screen showed Jacob Moore, alive and smiling. It was an old recording, taken during a Exitherian rescue mission years ago. In the video, Moore was helping to evacuate civilians from a collapsing mining colony. "Courage isn't about fighting," Moore said in the recording. "It's about protecting those who can't fight for themselves. That's why we're here, not as conquerors, but as allies." The broadcast ended, leaving Exitherian citizens stunned. For many, it was the first time they realized who Jacob Moore had been. A man who had saved their people, only to be killed by their own hands. Cliffhanger. In a secret meeting, General Torque makes a bold decision. "We've underestimated humanity's strength, their unity, and their will. If we don't act now, there won't be an empire left to protect." The camera pans out to show a hologram of Earth. "It's time we face them, not with weapons, but with the truth." The revelation. The Exitherian capital, Zelthar Prime, was a world of gleaming spires and bustling commerce. Yet beneath its surface, unease had taken root. The human silent war had turned the once mighty empire into a fractured shadow of its former self. Supply lines were gone, colonies abandoned, and allies suspiciously silent. But the most unsettling development came not from humanity's actions, but their words. In a dimly lit archive room deep within the Exitherian High Command, General Torque stood before an ancient holographic console. The hum of the device filled the silence as rows of files appeared, detailing every recorded encounter between the Xatherians and humanity. Torque's clawed hand hesitated over a particular file titled Operation Heartfire, Jacob Moore's Involvement. He selected the file, and a hologram sprung to life. A video of Moore during a crisis on the Xatherian colony of HFY over a decade ago. The video showed a younger Moore directing a chaotic evacuation effort, his calm voice cutting through the chaos. "Get those civilians to the transport ships now," Moore shouted, his face streaked with soot and sweat. The colony's core was unstable, and an explosion threatened to wipe out the entire settlement. A Xatherian child clung to his leg, crying in fear. Moore knelt, his human features strangely soft in the alien's eyes. "It's going to be okay," he said, his voice steady. "I'll get you to safety." The video shifted, showing Moore running back into the danger zone, despite protests from his team. He emerged moments later, carrying an injured Xatherian miner on his back. He collapsed onto the transport ship just as the colony erupted in a massive fireball behind him. Torque paused the playback, his chest tight. The miner in the video had been his cousin. He had never known who had saved him until now. In the Xatherian council chamber, Torque presented the footage to the assembled leaders. The counselors watched in stunned silence as the images unfolded, each moment peeling back their misconceptions about the human they had killed. When the recording ended, the chamber was deathly quiet. Finally, Torque broke the silence. "This is the man we executed, a man who risked his life for our people. Tell me, was his death worth it?" Councillor Varix, who had been among the loudest voices calling for aggression, looked away, shame flickering across his features. "We didn't know," he muttered. "We didn't want to know," Torque snapped. "We chose to see humans as a threat because it was easier than seeing the truth. And now we're paying the price." Meanwhile, on the human command ship Erebus, Admiral Grant Sinclair prepared his next move. A young officer approached, carrying a datapad. "Admiral, we intercepted a Xatherian transmission. They're accessing records of Jacob Moore's past missions." Sinclair raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. They're starting to understand." The officer hesitated. "Should we take advantage of this?" "No," Sinclair replied firmly. "We don't need to twist the knife. The truth will do that for us." On Zelphar Prime, the revelation of Moore's heroism spread rapidly. Civilians began whispering in the streets about the human who had saved Xatherian lives. Some demanded answers, while others questioned their government's decisions. In a quiet corner of the city, a young Xatherian mother clutched her child tightly as she watched the footage of Moore for the 5th time. Tears streamed down her face. Her husband had been among those Moore had saved on HFY. "Why didn't they tell us?" she whispered. Her neighbor, an elderly Xatherian, shook his head. "Because they wanted us to believe humans were monsters. But it seems the real monsters are closer to home." The Xatherian Council, now fractured by internal dissent, faced mounting pressure from their people. Protests erupted across the empire, demanding accountability for Moore's death. The council knew they couldn't ignore the growing unrest, but admitting their mistake would be unprecedented. "We cannot afford to lose face." Varix argued during a heated session. "If we admit guilt, we show weakness to the entire galaxy. And if we don't," Torque shot back, "we'll lose more than face. We'll lose our empire." The debate raged until Torque finally stood, his voice cutting through the noise. "We have one chance to make this right. Jacob Moore didn't die for vengeance. He died because we let fear guide us. It's time we prove we're better than that." In a historic move, the Xatherians broadcasted a galaxy-wide message. General Torque appeared on every major channel, his tone somber and measured. "To the people of the galaxy, and to humanity in particular, we owe an apology. We were wrong to take the life of Jacob Moore, a man who sought peace and gave us far more than we ever gave him. His death is a stain on our honor, one we must work to erase." The message sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Species that had viewed Exitherians as arrogant and unyielding were stunned by their admission of guilt. Humanity, though still wary, paused their retaliations. Cliffhanger. As the broadcast ended, Carla Reyes watched from the bridge of the horizon. She frowned, her arms crossed. "It's a nice speech," she said, "but words won't bring him back." Miles Carter, standing beside her, nodded. "What do we do now?" Reyes's gaze hardened. "We make sure they don't forget who Jacob was, or what they owe him." The turning point. The Exitherian apology, though unprecedented, was only the beginning. Humanity's leadership watched the broadcast with cold skepticism. Words could not undo the damage caused by Commander Jacob Moore's death or erase the lives disrupted by Exitherian arrogance. The galaxy had heard their remorse, but now it was time to see if their actions would match their words. In the United Earth Fleet's War Council, Admiral Grant Sinclair stood before a holographic map of Exitherian territories. The map was littered with red indicators, supply lines severed, colonies destabilized, and fleets scattered. President Leela Monroe entered the room, her presence commanding the attention of every officer. "I saw the Exitherian broadcast," she said, her voice calm but firm. "What's your assessment, Admiral?" Sinclair clasped his hands behind his back. "They're desperate. Their apology was a calculated move to stall us while they regroup." Monroe tilted her head. "And if it's genuine?" The Admiral allowed a rare smirk. "Then they'll prove it." On Zelphar Prime, General Torque knew the apology was far from enough. His people demanded action, and the galaxy was watching. As he walked through the bustling streets of the capital, he noticed the shift in the air. The once proud Exitherians now moved with uncertainty, their confidence shaken. Torque stopped at a public square where a massive hologram of Jacob Moore played on a loop. It was the now famous footage of Moore carrying an injured Exitherian miner to safety. A crowd had gathered, their eyes fixed on the human's determined face. One voice broke the silence. "Why did we kill him?" Torque turned to see a young Exitherian girl clutching her mother's hand, her wide, innocent eyes filled with confusion. The mother lowered her gaze, unable to answer. Torque felt a pang of guilt, deeper than any he had ever known. He approached the hologram and stood before the crowd. "We killed him because we were afraid," Torque admitted, his voice carrying across the square. "But fear is no excuse. It is time we face the consequences of our actions." Humanity, however, was not quick to forgive. On the bridge of the horizon, Captain Carla Reyes paced back and forth. Her crew monitored the latest Exitherian movements, searching for signs of deception. "They're broadcasting footage of Jacob all over their empire," Miles Carter reported. "It's almost like they're trying to make him a martyr." Reyes frowned. "Martyrs don't bring back the dead, and I don't trust them yet." A beep from the comms interrupted their conversation. "Captain, incoming message from Admiral Sinclair," a crew member announced. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen. "Reyes, you're to meet with the Exitherian envoy in neutral space. They're requesting peace talks." Reyes crossed her arms. "Why me?" Sinclair's expression softened. "Because Jacob trusted you, and because if this is a trap, you're the one I trust to get out alive." In a secluded sector of space, the human frigate Horizon and the Exitherian envoy ship docked at a neutral station. The tension was palpable as Carla Reyes entered the meeting room, flanked by 2 armed guards. On the other side of the table, General Torque stood, his silver scales catching the dim light. Reyes didn't waste time. "You've apologized. You've shown regret. But that doesn't bring back Commander Moore or undo the damage you've caused. So tell me, General, why should we trust you?" Torque met her gaze, his expression grim. "Because I am prepared to offer you something that no Exitherian leader has ever offered anyone." Reyes raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Torque hesitated, then placed a small holographic device on the table. A map appeared, displaying the location of Cytherian weapons caches, hidden fleets, and classified research facilities. "Our empire's secrets," Torque said. "Every weakness we have. If you truly want justice for Jacob Moore, take this." The room fell silent. Even Reyes's guards exchanged stunned glances. "You're giving us your entire military playbook?" Reyes asked incredulously. Torque nodded. "Yes, because Jacob Moore's death was more than a tragedy. It was a failure of our values. If exposing our vulnerabilities ensures peace, then so be it." Reyes studied him carefully. She had expected half-truths and excuses, but this was something else entirely. The data Torque provided sent shockwaves through humanity's leadership. Admiral Sinclair and President Monroe convened an emergency meeting to discuss the offer. "They're practically handing us their empire on a silver platter," Sinclair said, his tone skeptical. "It could be a trap." Monroe tapped her fingers on the table. "Or it could be genuine." "What's your gut, Admiral?" Sinclair paused, then sighed. "I think they're scared. And scared people do desperate things." Back on Zelfar Prime, the Exatherian people began to rally behind the new narrative. Statues of Jacob Moore were erected in public spaces, and his name became a symbol of hope and redemption. In a surprising move, Torque authorized the dismantling of several Exatherian weapons facilities, broadcasting the process across the galaxy. It was a bold statement. They were willing to disarm themselves in the name of peace. Cliffhanger. As humanity deliberated their next steps, Carla Reyes received an encrypted message on the horizon. It was a private recording from Jacob Moore's personal logs, sent by an unknown source. "Carla," Jacob's voice said, filled with quiet resolve. "If you're hearing this, then something's gone wrong. I always believed in the Cytherians, even when no one else did. Maybe I was wrong, but maybe, just maybe, they're better than we think. Trust your instincts." Reyes stared at the message, her mind racing. Trust was a dangerous gamble, but Jacob had never led her astray before. A reckoning. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as Cytherian disarmament continued. For the first time in its history, the proud empire was voluntarily dismantling its military strongholds, broadcasting each step to humanity and its allies. Yet, the tension remained thick. Humanity's leaders had not yet responded. Would they accept this unprecedented gesture, or would they strike while the Cytherians were at their weakest? On the bridge of the horizon, Captain Carla Reyes replayed Jacob Moore's encrypted message for the third time. His voice, calm yet resolute, resonated in her mind. "Trust your instincts." Her instincts told her two things. The Exatherians were sincere, but sincerity didn't erase the damage they had caused. Justice demanded more than symbolic gestures. Miles Carter approached her cautiously. "You've been quiet, Captain. Got something on your mind?" Reyes leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. "It's not enough, Miles. The disarmament, the apologies, it's all a show. If we let them off the hook now, what's to stop them from turning on us the moment they recover?" Miles nodded. "So what do we do?" Reyes sighed. "We make them prove they've changed. And not just to us, to the galaxy." In the United Earth Fleet's War Council, Admiral Grant Sinclair presented his plan to President Monroe and the other senior leaders. "The Exatherians are offering complete transparency," Sinclair began, displaying the data General Torque had provided. "Their weaknesses, their supply chains, even the locations of their secret research facilities. It's a goldmine." President Monroe raised an eyebrow. "And you trust it?" Sinclair hesitated. "Trust might be a strong word, but I believe they're desperate enough to mean it." Monroe leaned forward. "Then we need to do more than take their data. We need to test their commitment to peace." Sinclair frowned. "How?" Monroe's expression hardened. "We give them an impossible choice. On Zelfar Prime, General Torque received humanity's ultimatum. The Exitherians would assist in dismantling the remnants of their war machine by aiding in the liberation of enslaved colonies on the fringe of their territory. These colonies, subjugated under Exitherian rule for decades, had long been a point of contention between their species and humanity. The message was clear. If the Exitherians wanted peace, they would need to undo their past sins, not just with words, but with action. The Exitherian Council erupted in outrage. "This is humiliation," one councillor snarled. "They're forcing us to turn on our own empire." "It's not humiliation," Torque said firmly. "It's justice." The councillors turned to him in shock. Torque's voice rose, filled with conviction. "We enslaved those colonies. We exploited them, drained their resources, and left their people to suffer. If we want to prove we've changed, this is our chance." The first mission took place on a distant mining world, Calavar 7. A harsh, barren landscape scarred by years of resource extraction. It was guarded by a fleet of loyalist Cytherian warships. General Torque personally led the operation, accompanied by a small human delegation that included Captain Carla Reyes. The loyalist fleet commander, a fierce Exitherian named Zaruk, greeted Torque's arrival with disdain. "You betray your own kind," Zaruk spat, his claws flexing. "For what?" "Human approval." "I betray nothing," Torque replied coldly. "Our actions here are not for humanity's benefit. They are for the future of our people. Stand down." Zaruk sneered. "And if I don't?" Torque's gaze hardened. "Then you will face the consequences of your choices." The battle for Calavar 7 was swift but brutal. Loyalist forces refused to surrender, forcing Torque's fleet and the human delegation to fight side by side for the first time. The combined effort showcased an unexpected synergy, Cytherian precision paired with human ingenuity. As the final Loyalist ship was disabled, Carla Reyes stood on the bridge of her frigate, watching the remnants of the battle fade into the stars. She turned to Torque, who appeared on the comms. "You held your end of the bargain," she admitted. "And we will continue to do so," Torque replied. "This is only the beginning." The liberation of Calavar 7 sparked a wave of change. Colony after colony was freed, and the Exitherians began to dismantle their oppressive systems under human oversight. For the first time, the galaxy witnessed what true cooperation between their species could achieve. But not everyone was pleased. Across the Exitherian Empire, factions loyal to the old regime began to rise. They saw Torque and his allies as traitors, and whispers of rebellion spread through the shadows. Cliffhanger. In a darkened chamber on a remote Exitherian moon, a group of loyalist leaders gathered. At their center was Zaruk, nursing his wounds but still burning with hatred. "General Torque has betrayed us," Zaruk growled. "And the humans think they've won." He leaned forward, his voice low and venomous. "It's time we remind them that a cornered predator is the most dangerous." The Loyalists activated a hologram, revealing the schematics of a devastating weapon hidden deep within Exitherian space. "If the humans want peace," Zaruk said with a cruel smile, "then we'll show them the cost of their arrogance, redemption, and legacy." The galaxy teetered on the edge of chaos. While the Exitherian Empire worked to dismantle its oppressive systems under human guidance, whispers of rebellion grew louder. Loyalist factions, angered by what they saw as capitulation, had activated a secret doomsday weapon, the Thanatos Array. Hidden deep within an asteroid field, the weapon had the potential to destroy entire fleets and reignite a war neither side could afford. In the war room aboard the Horizon, Captain Carla Reyes stared at the hologram of the Thanatos Array. Its destructive capabilities were clear, but its purpose was more sinister. It symbolized a desperate attempt by the old regime to cling to power. Admiral Grant Sinclair's voice came through the comms. "Reyes, your mission is clear. Locate and disable the array before it can be deployed. General Torque will be accompanying you." Reyes frowned. "With all due respect, Admiral, can we trust him?" Sinclair's tone softened. If Jacob Moore trusted him, So can we. But keep your guard up. Reyes exhaled sharply, her mind flashing back to Moore's final message. Trust your instincts. She nodded. Understood. We'll stop this. The mission to the Thanatos array was fraught with danger. The asteroid field was a labyrinth of shifting debris, hiding not only the weapon, but also the Loyalist fleet protecting it. As the human Titherian task force navigated the field, tension simmered between the two sides. On the bridge of the horizon, Torque stood beside Reyes, his imposing figure a constant reminder of their uneasy alliance. You've put a lot on the line, Reyes said, breaking the silence. Turning against your own people, risking everything. Why? Torque's gaze remained fixed on the holographic map. Because I saw the truth too late. Jacob Moore wasn't just a diplomat. He was a better man than any of us deserved. If his death can lead to peace, then I'll pay any price. Reyes studied him, searching for any sign of deceit, but found only sincerity. Let's make sure his death wasn't in vain, she said, her voice firm. As they approached the Thanatos array, the Loyalist fleet intercepted them. A brutal battle erupted, with human and Exetherian ships fighting side by side. The Loyalists fought with ferocity, their desperation fueling every maneuver. On board the array, Zarok oversaw its activation. The weapon hummed to life, its energy core glowing ominously. Let them come, he snarled. We'll wipe them out in one strike. Inside the asteroid field, Reyes and Torque led a daring infiltration team to disable the array. The operation was a mix of human ingenuity and Thytherian strength, with both sides relying on each other to succeed. As they moved through the array's corridors, the tension was palpable. Zarok's forces had fortified the weapon, and every corner was a potential ambush. In the heart of the array, they encountered Zarok himself. The former fleet commander stood before the control console, a defiant smirk on his face. You're too late, Zarok said, his voice dripping with venom. The weapon is primed. One strike, and your precious alliance will crumble. Reyes raised her weapon, her voice steady. Stand down, Zarok. This ends now. Zarok laughed, his claws flexing. You think peace is the answer? You're fools. War is the only truth. Torque stepped forward, his voice cold. You're wrong, Zarok. Jacob Moore showed us a better way. And you've blinded yourself to it. The confrontation erupted into a fierce battle. Zarok's loyalists fought desperately, but the combined strength of Reyes's team prevailed. In the chaos, Torque engaged Zarok in a brutal one-on-one fight. You betrayed our people. Zarok roared, slashing at Torque. I saved them. Torque countered, his strikes precise. With a final blow, he disarmed Zarok, pinning him to the ground. As the team worked to disable the array, alarms blared. The energy core was unstable, and a chain reaction threatened to destroy the entire field. Reyes quickly assessed the situation. We don't have time to shut it down completely, she said. We need to overload the core and destroy the array. But we won't make it out alive. Torque stepped forward. You will. I'll stay behind and ensure the overload. Reyes's eyes widened. That's suicide. Torque's expression was resolute. This is my atonement. Tell humanity. Tell them I'm sorry. Reyes hesitated, then placed a hand on his shoulder. For what it's worth, Jacob would have forgiven you. So do I. The team evacuated as Torque initiated the core's overload. Zarok, restrained and furious, screamed, You'll doom us all. Torque glanced at him, his voice calm. No, I'll save us. As the team escaped, the Thanatos array erupted in a blinding explosion, taking the Loyalist fleet with it. The galaxy watched as the weapon that symbolized war and division was reduced to dust. In the aftermath, humanity and the Exetherian Empire solidified their alliance. Torque's sacrifice became a symbol of redemption, echoing Jacob Moore's legacy. Statues of both men were erected side by side, representing two species united by loss, but bound by hope. At a quiet memorial on Earth, Carla Rice stood before Jacob Moore's monument. She placed a hand on the inscription, "Peace is worth fighting for, but never alone." She whispered, "We did it, Jacob. We finally did it." Epilogue. As the galaxy began to heal, a message was discovered in Torque's final transmission. "To humanity, and to my own people, let this be our last war. If I have learned anything from Jacob Moore, it is this: peace is the greatest victory of all." The transmission ended with the sound of a heartbeat fading into silence, a reminder of the sacrifices made to forge a new future.